back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech. This is Community Matters. We're talking about recreational marijuana today. And the point of the show is one doctor and the Hawaii Medical Association who feel that recreational marijuana may not be good for you. So the question is, should we legalize it? And that is Malcolm Ng, MD. We'll be talking to him in a minute, but I just want to tell you that there is at least one bill, maybe a number of bills pending in the legislature. Senator Chris Lee was one of the introducers, and somebody from the House also. And the bill I saw was fairly comprehensive, thoughtful, in the sense that it covered a lot of detail that you didn't think of before. It's not just simply we're going to legalize recreational marijuana. It's a lot of other details that come with that. So Malcolm Ng is going to express his views on the medical implications of recreational marijuana and whether the principal question, we should legalize it recreationally. After this short message, we'll be right back for that discussion. Welcome to the show, Malcolm. It's nice to see you.
Hi, Jay. I'm really happy to be here to share my knowledge of research that I have done on recreational cannabis or marijuana.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the research you've done. Why you did it, how you did it, under what organizational parameters,
well,
and what you concluded at the end of the day.
Sure. Now I'll go into it. The reason I got into the research was I was assigned this task by the president of the Hawaii Medical Association 2 years ago to look into the possible neurologic damaging effects of cannabis. And I did not know at that time how much I really found out in the research. And it was like opening a Pandora's box. I thought, well, it may not be really good, but I didn't know how damaging it was, especially to the young brains, the developing brains. And the reason it is damaging is because it contains a chemical called THC. Now, THC that's the chemical that gives you the high. And unfortunately, they have been increasing the amount of THC in recreational cannabis for a long time now. And what you're getting, the amounts of THC are 2 to 4 times as much as your grandmother used to have when she smoked a joint. So they're getting.
I beg your pardon. My grandmother never smoked a joint.
Okay, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And the people that were using it in the olden days, we might say, in the past, they weren't as much at risk because the THC wasn't as high level.
Interesting.
High level of the THC is what's causing the problem.
So how does that work biochemically, Malcolm? What does the THC do to the body, to a given cell in the body, to make it dangerous?
Great. I want to show you these slides here. These slides there are only 3 of them or 4 of them. They're from a lecture that I gave at Kallander Hospital. The first slide I'd like to talk about is damage by THC. The THC causes lower brain volumes. After initial increase in the gray matter, then it becomes, when normally there's a pruning effect of the brain as it's developing, it stops that and then it starts again. But it also interferes with the folding patterns of the cortex of the brain. Your brain is not like a smooth mass. It's got little crevices in it. And that folding, we call it folding, is part of the development of the brain. And it should be normal, but it interrupts that also. It also causes thinning of the brain. So, you don't want to have a thin brain, especially if you're having a challenge in education and learning things. And you don't want to have a thin brain at the end of your life either. Unfortunately, we're getting 2 ends of the spectrum here that I'm talking about that are especially at risk. One is the young brain, the one that is developing, which this interrupts, the THC interrupts it. And I like to show actually a slide number 2, talking about 2 particular areas of the brain that are affected. This is
when you say thinning the brain, you really mean shrinkage of the brain?
I mean thinning of the cortex, yes.
You mean it gets horizontally more narrow? Is that what happens?
More narrow, yeah. And the two areas of the brain that are particularly affected, which are the hippocampus. If you can't remember hippocampus, think hippopotamus, okay? That little part of your brain that is the hippocampus is your memory hard drive. This allows you to get short-term memory and then store it, and then from there it goes back into the cortex for long-term memory. Hippocampus is very, very important because that's the first part that starts shrinking as we get older. That's the part that shrinks in dementia. You hear about dementia, you hear
Is
about—
it a cause or an effect, Malcolm?
You don't want to have a small—
Does it cause dementia or does dementia make it shrink? Which way does it go?
It probably causes it. It causes it. It's a very essential part of— you cannot find a demented person without a shrunken hippocampus, all right?
Okay, let me ask you this though. Permit me to interrupt once in a while. So if I'm young and teenager, in my 20s, what have you, and I do recreational marijuana, and indeed this bill allows me to buy a fair amount of it, on a regular basis. This is not a little bit of marijuana. This is over time, it's a lot. So let's assume I imbibe in marijuana in my youth, okay? Now I'm getting older. Now I'm in my 60s or, I don't know, 50s, 60s, 70s. Is this going to come back to me? Is it going to be sort of a delayed reaction?
No,
Is it going to be a greater risk of dementia?
No, I'm not talking about the chronic marijuana users having shrinkage of the hippocampus over a period of time.
And that leads to dementia.
Yes.
So if I'm taking marijuana, if I'm imbibing, and I stop, does that stop the shrinkage?
Yeah, I would think it would be in your favor, but I can tell you the other part of the brain that I showed on that slide is the amygdala. The amygdala is a part of the brain. Look back at the slide, that second word there, amygdala. That is your risk recognition center. That part of the brain tells you when you see a 10-foot ditch with running water rushing through it, no, I better not jump over that because I might land in that water and get swept down the river. Understand? Risk recognition. So this is why cannabis or pot has been termed the perfect gateway drug. Because people not only get highs from THC, but then they think, oh, well, it won't be so bad if I try that other drug and that other drug and that other drug. It's risk recognition. And where Colorado is concerned—
You mean that if you don't have recognition, if the amygdala is affected, then you're more likely to make a decision. It's a decision process, your understanding process that may interfere with your ability to say no to another drug.
Yes, and also, I believe what happened, for instance, when they legalized cannabis or pot in Colorado, they had a great increase in accidents, in young drivers that were on the road and got in accidents. And may I make a plug also for this? We haven't heard much about what is in the bloodstream of some of these mass shooters, right? Have you seen any toxicology? I would love to see what the toxicology is because I have a suspicion that many of them are on drugs and they're high, and they may even be just marijuana drugs.
And well, what about that? The police, they want to take an alcohol, blood alcohol test. They got all
they do that.
Do they do that for marijuana, for THC?
They should do that. They should be able to get the blood samples to see what was in the system when the accident occurred or when the violence occurred.
Well, are you saying they don't get it now?
What's that?
Are you saying
they get it? No, I don't think it's required. And unfortunately, we should be looking into that area.
And by the way, you're an ophthalmologist, which I have great regard for, and for your medical practice. But how do you make the leap from ophthalmology to brain science?
Oh, okay. Research, my friend, research. I've co-authored and I've written over 65 peer-reviewed journals and I hold a position as clinical professor of surgery or ophthalmology at the medical school. So when I was assigned this task by the president of the Hawaii Medical Association to research this topic, in fact, he just said, "Hey, Mal, you do a lot of research. Will you look into the damage that might be caused by recreational pot?" I said, "Sure, I'll look into it for you." Well, I was stunned how much was coming out of that. I mean, I just was shocked.
We're talking about the literature, medical literature.
Yeah.
And I expect there's a ton of medical literature for all the medical schools in the country, all the medical research organizations. And that's what you would have done to start.
Yeah, well, all you have to do is go on something called PubMed. You type in cannabis, you type in recreational, and you reveal all the studies that have been done, and you just go into the literature and read the studies or the analyses of the studies, and those are the conclusions. I mean, that's the way.
Did you find the conclusions were singular? In other words, they all seem to agree that there were, negative side effects from
negative
and marijuana.
Negative, yeah.
I mean, is it controversial?
No,
is there another side to this coin?
There were things that really, really kind of blew me away. One of this was a study of PET, which is positive electron tomography of the brain. Listen to this, Jay. Did you know that those that are adept in this neuroradiology field can tell if a 14-year-old child has smoked one joint, just one, by effects in the brain that they can detect with the PET? That's astounding.
Is that a structural change, a chemical change?
Yes, a structural change.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was really the biggest shock of all my research. I said, holy cow, you mean one joint will do that? Yes.
That's pretty interesting from a forensic point of view to be able to find out.
Yes, absolutely. And I was so shocked about that particular finding. But I'll tell you another personal experience that I had with a friend of mine who decided that he was living in California. So he said, his host at this party said, "Oh, try one of these brownies." He knew what was in it. He said, "No, I'm not going to touch that. No, I don't smoke and I don't do joints and I don't do any of that." So she kept pressuring him. So I said, "Okay, I'll take half a brownie." So he took one half and he crunched it up and ate it. And 1 hour later, no effect. He thought, yeah. Well, says goodbye to his host. "I think I'll drive home now." He stands up and falls flat on the floor. They caught him before he hit the floor. Now, here's the point. What if he had gone out on the road and was driving at that point? Because brownies, recreational marijuana and brownies, is more toxic in a way than smoking it. Because smoking is a gradual infusion of the drug. But brownies come in like gangbusters and whack you over the head. And they've already done studies also showing that, you know how when you get this so-called concussive injury from the brain, from football, and you get concussive injuries in the brain? Well, the brain of the patients who have been with dementia and elderly show the similar changes to what you do when you have a concussion, repeated concussion. So here's my point. It's a chemical concussion.
Yeah.
Want a chemical concussion?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So, what interests me is, so you get all this literature. What about the American Medical Association? Do they accept this literature? Are they saying
they are firmly against recreational marijuana. They think that the drug might have a place, cannabis itself, even with THC, in what they call medical marijuana, which they can control the THC levels if it's under a certain level that they say, okay, you can have up to there and not beyond that. But people who use it recreationally, they want the highest levels of THC they can get.
Because that gives you
in other words, don't burn me a little bit, burn me high.
It gives you the high.
The highest. Yeah. THC responsible for the high.
Yeah.
Not CBD now. I'm not talking about CBD.
Yeah. Now, what about the Hawaii Medical Association? You presented your research to them.
Yes, I have.
With the conclusion, as we said.
Their conclusion is that it's not a good thing to have recreational marijuana.
Okay, and
how much time do we have left? I can give you a summary of the major points that were made at the various levels. And
yeah, please do. Please do. We have time.
Right. Let's look at this slide, reasons not to legalize cannabis. Can you flow that slide up? Here it is. The legalization will lead to a greater use of pot, especially by our youth, because of perceived harmlessness. We're going to say, oh, it's legal, it's fine. And the kids are going to hear that, and they're going to be using it too.
Well, that's what happens. If government says it's okay, then people treat that as an instruction that it's okay.
Yeah. So then I made this point already, but number 2 is toxicity of THC, the major component of pot, has demonstrated structural and functional disruption. I'll call it disruption of the developing brain. And the brain takes 25 years, to about mid-20s, to be fully developed. So if you're going to use it at all, you should at least wait till you're 25, right? Okay. Now, here's the other part of the spectrum. That last part is that chronic long-term use, especially when started in young people, has resulted in major medical illness and shrinkage of hippocampus. What is the major medical illness? It's schizophrenia. At least some studies show it doubles the rate of schizophrenia. Now, schizophrenia is a very complex disease because I believe there are genetic susceptibilities with family history. There are other factors that go into this. But I believe also that using recreational cannabis in many cases has tipped the scale over. And people get what I call psychotic episodes. They may not become full-blown schizophrenics, but there's a psychotic episode they call catatonia. Catatonia. What is catatonia? You lie down, you can't move, you can't talk.
You're catatonic.
So, you're catatonic. And 2 young girls at Kallander Hospital, my co-presenter in this little educational series that we had over there, showed the histories of 2 young girls that were at a dance, a high school dance, and somebody behind the dance hall had recreational marijuana. And they both took it. And both of them were so stone cold they couldn't move. They were taken to the emergency room. Now they recovered. I want to emphasize, they did recover, supportive medical care. Hopefully they're not going to have too much lasting damage from that effect. But I wouldn't want my kid to have, number 1, a concussion from football or a concussion from a chemical. That's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should know that.
Mm-hmm.
And not just say, oh, that's okay. Everybody smokes. Everybody's happy. And by the way, that happy thing, that also was a myth. When I looked at the statistics from Colorado, there was an increase in teenage aggression episodes after legalized it in Colorado, not a decrease.
Well, what about all that giggling that you hear about?
What about what?
Giggling, laughing.
Giggling, yeah. Okay. And some people, again, this is individual susceptibilities, probably. But I think you might say this. I haven't done the full research on this, so I'm just giving you a hypothesis. If a person is emotionally predisposed to problems, like violence, like other things, other ways of antisocial behavior. Now, in those cases, we know, number 1, certainly liquor, booze, sort of kicks it over the top. And the myth is that marijuana won't kick it over the top. But that's not proven. And that's my problem with legalizing marijuana in the state of Hawaii.
Well, let me ask you this, Malcolm. We have a country, ever since Prohibition was repealed, and maybe much longer than that, back to the 19th century, that runs on alcohol. I mean, alcohol everywhere, bars everywhere, drinking everywhere. And we're not talking about, maybe it depends on the generation. We're not talking about, California wines.
Yeah.
We're talking about hard stuff.
Hard stuff.
We're talking about people getting drunk and becoming alcoholic and
Right.
ruining their lives. And that is habit forming. Depending on your physiology, you can, become habituated. And so my question to you is, which would you rather have? Say your teenage kid or your kid in the 20s, would you rather have a kid that is, habituated on alcohol, or a kid that is habituated in some way on marijuana?
Yeah, that's a good question. Neither.
I knew you were going to say that.
Neither. I'm going to tell you something. You're playing with fire with a young brain. And when you're messing around with that, it's not a good thing. So I would not have a kid. And there's a lot of history. There's a book that was written by a psychologist that said addictions are fine if they're healthy addictions. I'd rather have that kid go out and be addicted to running track, even playing football, except I don't like the concussion part. But let's say basketball, or sports, or surfing. And amazing thing was that people at one time, they associated pot smoking with surfers because the surfers thought they were doing better. However, that was totally disproven. It was their impression they were doing better. And it was the same as what happened with automobiles. They put them in simulated virtual automobiles, and they said, okay, drive this course as fast as you can. And they did it with and without the influence of cannabis, right? And the ones that took the cannabis, they thought they did fantastic. Oh, I really killed that course. But when they analyzed the virtual, they had accidents all over the place. That the non brain affected, non-cannabis brain actually did better, in other words.
When I came to Hawaii, Malcolm.
By the way, I'm still surfing.
I know you are. Everybody should know that.
Yeah, and I look at my compadres, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't surf anymore, unfortunately, and they're not well enough.
There's a high in surfing, though.
There's a high in surfing, but that's the kind of addiction you want.
Yeah. So, when I came to Hawaii back in the 60s, it was a lifestyle thing. I mean, just like on the mainland, it was a lifestyle thing.
Right.
Everybody was smoking pot. Yeah. And, here in Hawaii, there was a tremendous amount of pot. I mean, everybody was talking about it. And it was illegal. All of it was all illegal. And yet that whole generation was out there smoking pot in the belief that it was okay. There was a brisk trade in all of that. And now, if you look at the policymakers, the legislators, they're getting their political pressure from people, who like pot. And maybe that generation, later generation, who believe that, pot is part of the Hawaii youth culture, or generally speaking, the culture. In fact, even the governor, who is the new governor, who is a doctor himself, an emergency room physician, he likes recreational pot and he supports this bill. There's a lot of people in the legislature support this bill. So there's an enormous amount of support for this bill. And now you're talking about the science, the medicine. Talking about the medical association here and nationally. You wrote an article for the Star Advertiser a week or two ago that was, essentially, advocating for no recreational marijuana. And I guess my question is that, what do you think is going to happen on this bill? There must be a huge number of people who want to see it passed. Maybe not fully advised, not fully aware of what you're saying, but they want to see it passed for a lot of, what do you want to call it? Useful cultural reasons.
Yes, I'll give you the answer right here. There's a book written by Aldous Huxley. It's called Brave New World. Have you ever read it?
Sure.
Do you remember that drug called Soma?
I do indeed. Yes.
What was Soma used for?
To subjugate people.
Exactly. It made the populace passive. What does pot do? Same thing. They make them not care about things that they should be caring about, like working. And one of the reasons the Afghan army failed, and anybody who's been over there knows about it, the ones that we supported with all our tax dollars, our advisors could not get their troops to stop smoking over there, pot. They came in stoned, They wouldn't learn their techniques that they should have learned. And they were a pushover for the Taliban. And for one thing, the Taliban think it's terrible to smoke pot, and they don't get into that drug. You understand? So the Taliban took them out, what, 3 days?
Interesting.
Collapsed.
Very interesting. Well, it certainly undermines the efficacy of a military force.
It sure does.
Or any force, a corporate team.
Oh, yeah, of course it will.
Same
because
thing,
it knocks your accuracy down.
Yeah.
Well, here's another question. If you want to legalize it, just answer this other question. Would you want to have a surgeon who is a chronic pot user at home? He's fine at the office. He's fine. But he goes home and smokes pot, or do you want somebody who doesn't smoke any of that stuff?
How about an airline pilot? How about an airline pilot?
Or an airline pilot. There you go. You want one of those guys on your plane?
Now you have distinguished, and I guess everybody, in the medical field does distinguish, recreational pot from medicinal pot. Right. Could you do that for us now? Could you tell us the difference and why you would not necessarily oppose medicinal pot?
Yeah. Now, the THC component, which causes the high in recreational, is also present in medicinal cannabis. And it is used in certain cases, like chronic pain. Okay. So what are our answers to chronic pain? Well, opioids. So you can get opioid addiction. If somebody has chronic pain from cancer, arthritis, or something that nobody else has a good treatment for, well, you know what? Maybe that's the part that you're going to use the medical cannabis for, because you're not worried that time of shrinkage of the hippocampus or anything. You're trying to get this person out of pain. That's a different issue altogether. But the guy off the street, who doesn't have chronic pain and no chronic cancer to fight or anything coming like that, well, then those people, if they want to preserve up here the hippocampus, they better stay away from it. We're seeing an increase in dementia because of increasing age. I'm sure you know some elderly people who are groping for words on TV. You might mean even some of our politicians. You know what I mean?
Well, I think one of the points you touched me with here in this discussion is that if you have, say, 100 million people, all of whom are taking pot, is that as responsible as citizenry, as a group of citizens who aren't? Because if they don't care particularly, if they're not really focused on, preserving the democracy, because they're not fully equipped. Cognitive, thank you. Then, that has another kind of effect on our society, and it's a societal effect. So here, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let's assume, I'm not taking a position on it, but let's assume this bill passes, okay? And then we have recreational marijuana, far beyond medical marijuana, and everybody taking marijuana because they think the government has made a statement and has said it's okay. Okay, one of the things that happened after the medical marijuana bill was passed was the medical community, in fact, everybody community, was watching to see what would happen. They were waiting for the stories to come in, good, bad, and otherwise, about how medical marijuana would affect people, would affect their cognitive abilities, would affect their lives, and so forth. So let's assume for this discussion, Malcolm, that it does pass. Okay? What should we be looking for after that? Because that requires a more careful, a more intense analysis of how it affects a given population, right?
Right. Well, I would hope that we would monitor those that are getting in accidents, major accidents, those that are in major violent crimes. We should do toxicology on any of these so-called mass shooters. Have you heard of any of the toxicology? I haven't heard.
No, I don't think it's being done.
But we do know that guy, that little teenager down in Texas that killed all those students in the school, he shot his grandmother in the face first. because she told him, I don't want you using that drug in the house. Marijuana.
Oh,
Did you know that?
no.
I shot him in the, so this guy shot her in the face and then went to school and shot all the students that he could get.
He may have been on it at the
You think
time.
he might have been on it?
Yeah.
Have you seen a
Yeah,
toxicology report yet?
I think that, yeah. Well, this is pretty.
Where are our physicians also too should be involved in that and demanding, where's the public? Demanding that they do toxicology. This guy got killed in the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why didn't we find out what was in his bloodstream at the time he was doing all this?
Yeah, we never heard about it, did we?
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
And was there a reason not to? Well, I guess the politicians want legalization of marijuana.
Well,
yeah, we don't.
Joe Biden is talking about the legalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
And, I don't think he's going to get it through so quick, but he's talking about it, and maybe someday it will happen, and we'll have a whole nation of THC, the THC nation, if you will.
Okay, but who's gonna do all the surgery? Who's gonna do the flying of the airplane? Who are going to be the first responders? Do you want a fireman coming up the ladder who's already smoked 5 joints for the day and doesn't mind coming up the ladder for you and going to carry you down?
You see, the problem is that our world, our country, the world is a more intense place than it was when you and I were younger.
Absolutely.
And there's more stress and strain and threat and anxiety, from any number of sources. Yeah. And just as alcohol served for a long time as a way to deal with that anxiety, now in later generations, pot is a way to deal with that anxiety. And it's very hard. That's why maybe we ought to look at Brave New World and get a little soma in our lives.
Well, let me challenge you on that. The reason alcohol, I know it can be a problem with chronic drinking, okay? But it is easier to metabolize. You cannot metabolize marijuana that way. And you smoke 1 joint, it's still detectable in your blood and urine for weeks. Okay? Weeks.
Yeah.
So my point is that if you differentiate the 2 evils, so to speak, drink or marijuana, I guess drinking is really safer in a way because at least you metabolize it and it's out of your system.
Well, that leads to the question of so I have my primary doctor, right? And she takes blood from me, once in a while, and she can look at a whole profile of what my blood is telling her.
Sure.
And there's a form that has all these profile characteristics, right? So one of those tests could be this accumulation of THC in my body, and I go to see her, and she says, "Jay, you're accumulating this stuff. There's all kinds of negative effects and, ultimately dementia. Don't you think you ought to cut it out? Because, from the last visit till this visit, you have an increase, 20% increase.
Again, okay, here's the dilemma of that, Jay. So the person the doctor is saying, oh, I got your THC level and it looks rather high. I think you would probably be better not to have so much in your system. By that time, the person hearing that advice has turned it off cognitively, is not going to listen anymore. Any more than a chronic alcoholic's going to listen to it. They don't listen to the advice by the doctor. How many doctors say, hey, you got to stop drinking, Joe? Yeah, right. So he goes, oh, I've been clean 1 week, 2 weeks, then falls off the wagon. So it's advice the doctors could give, but it's not going to be receptive. The people hearing that advice are not going to be receptive to it. And so, if they're dealing with depression that way and they've just lost their loved one, etc., they could get medical marijuana for that.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a solution, to make recreational marijuana more like medical marijuana. Lower levels of THC. Somebody has to look at you and see that you're not killing yourself or, shrinking your brain, so to speak. Is treated like it was medical marijuana. Then you have those guardrails in place. With treating everything as recreational, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending how you feel about it, This country is going in that direction.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're sort of like a problem because, we know cigarette smoke damages the lungs. Nobody has come out with a study that shows that smoking pot does not damage the lung. And we have chronic diseases that we have to deal with day in, day out, which need attention and prevention. So we thought we were doing a great thing by saying to the kids, oh no, don't smoke. You can vape. Yeah, how's that doing for you now, right? What's happened with vaping? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's...
See what I mean?
Hopefully that's off the
every
table.
time you try to give a solution that is really faulty, it doesn't work out, and then it falls through the crack. My advice is get a good addiction. I see some of my friends walking around in the hills of Nuuanu for their exercise. So they're moving. And by the way, since we're on the topic of the hippocampus, did you know that movement causes increased blood flow to the hippocampus? So everything you do on a physical basis actually helps your brain in the memory center. And I have this trick question for some of the medical students when I'm talking to them. I say, okay, so you have a person who's worried about memory loss and they're in their 50s and 60s. What are you going to advise for them if you had to choose one of two? Number one, do a crossword puzzle. Number two, go out and walk around the block 5 times. What would you choose? And the medical students always get suckered and they say, oh, do the puzzle. No. Go out and walk around the block 5 times.
We live in a modern world with biochemistry all around us, and a lot of
these scientific studies have already been proven.
Yeah,
athletes are really in good shape in the brain usually.
What I get out of this is this is a risk, a significant risk.
Yeah.
If you open the floodgates on it.
Yes.
And it's a risk like so many other addictive substances that are in our lives.
Yeah.
And of course, that includes potato chips, Yeah. There's all kinds of chemicals in that too. We live in a world of chemicals that are not necessarily. Somebody recently wrote a piece about how garden vegetables do not have the nutrients they used to have, So it was better before somehow.
Yeah.
And the question I put to you, and I'll suggest an answer too, if you don't mind. Is that what do we do about this? It's not only a matter of walking around the block.
Exactly.
It's a matter of making people aware.
Here's what we need. Since people are not motivated to go out and do the studies, we need physicians to give advice, right? And one of the problems I have with just building homes for the homeless, we know at least 1/3 of the homeless are either medically ill, that is mentally ill, or on drugs. So if you build them a nice apartment to stay in, are you going to solve that problem for that third, at least a third, maybe half, or maybe even more? I don't know all the statistics on this, but I know the minimum I heard is a third. 1/3, 30% of all those homeless lying out on the street out there are either mentally ill or they're on drugs. Now, you can provide them all the homes you want, all the nice properties you have. That is not going to solve the problem. What happened in San Francisco, for instance, when they took the homeless out of the tenderloin, I guess they call it, where the druggies were. And they said, okay, they're all homeless. The hotels are not being used. Let's pay for them to stay in the hotels. So they shipped the homeless into the hotels. And pretty soon they found out that some of the homeless were very inventive and they were manufacturing drugs in the rooms. They're actually making drugs that get sold on the street. Did that solve their homeless problem? I don't think so. It just created more homeless. Now,
so Malcolm, if I
people ask me, hey, what party do you belong to, Republican or Democrat? I say, I belong to the party. I don't belong to a Democrat or a Republican. I belong to the party of common sense. Common sense.
You're in the minority, Malcolm.
Sorry about that.
So, okay, so we're about to leave because we're running out of time. We did run out of time. So if somebody watching this wanted to get better informed about these medical effects, where do they look? Where would you refer them to so they could learn more and understand how it affects the lives, their lives and the lives of their families?
Yeah, if you are going to do a research project on anything, you can go to PubMed, it's called. PubMed is available to anybody for research on anything. You type in the name of the condition or you type in the drug itself, and you'll get articles that will come up, by the hundreds if you need them. And you can review those yourself. In the meantime, stay informed. I don't think the public is informed. I wasn't informed 2 years ago. I just thought, I don't want to get involved with drugs. I don't like the idea of smoking, might ruin my lungs, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't know the real dangers until I looked into it. And once I did, I said, oh my God.
Yeah, to say
certainly
nothing
raise
of
a kid not to get into drugs for sure, and not to start with pot.
To say nothing of the fact that there is further research and analysis of these processes going on, and the reports of that research do appear in the newspaper, in the public media.
Sure.
And so you have to watch out for that, because there will be further discoveries about all of this.
Oh, absolutely. That's medicine in general.
Yeah.
We always are curious about it. And this is the one ingredient that you must have as a researcher: curiosity. Curiosity drives research, medical research or any kind of research.
Yeah.
So be curious.
Well, I think that curiosity drives you, Malcolm. Malcolm being an extraordinary doctor here in Honolulu, who follows this for the love of knowledge and for the love of the community. Thank you so much, Malcolm.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.